The homework was long, but I don't think it was complex. I don't know if you guys will agree or not, that it wasn't complex. Essentially, you were to do something that we've already done several times in class, which was to create a person, an employee, and then you were to create an ESS user, so a login and password for this person, so they can log in into their own account, right? That was the homework. And as long as you followed all the directions, it should have been fine. The biggest mistake that people usually run into when they're doing this homework is when they're trying to create the user. So there is the login, right, that you're supposed to assign. There's the password, there's the repeat password, and then there's the fourth field where you have to put the full name of the person. And they actually get the last name and the first name reversed. So they'll try to put in the last name space first name, and then they won't be able to find that person, and that causes difficulty. But as long as you got the first name space last name, it shouldn't have caused you any kind of problems. Other than that, I mean, essentially the code that's being used here is very basic, and I'm sure some of you found more efficient ways, including some we discussed in class, to do this. So, does that look familiar to you guys? That was pretty much what was in the PowerPoint. There was very minor changes. One of them being that I'm sealing, not flooring. And the reason I'm sealing is because a name should always be at least one character. So if you were going to floor the length, the random length you were going to get is between a 0, so it means nothing. And I wanted to make sure that at least I get one character. So, and I think in the homework I actually asked you to do exactly 10 characters, but in the solution I have up to 10 characters. So, just an extra degree of confusion. But other than that, I think this should have been pretty much what we did in class, right? I think in class when we went over it. Hi. Yes. What's up?
I think in homework you said the first name should be from 1 to 7.
Yeah, this is last name.
And the last name is 1 to 10.
Yeah.
The problem I was getting, if let's say first name is 2 characters, and because it's random, and the last name 2 characters, when we create the user, we use it for username, so
That's
we get
true.
total 4, and it gives you the error because username should be minimum 5. So
Right,
when
that's
I
true.
made it minimum 3 characters, then it's
Yeah, so that's true. I haven't thought about that, but you're right. I can see how that could cause a problem. And I guess you also provided the solution. And you guys should all know how to create it from minimum to maximum, right? Because remember how we discussed last week that if you want to create a number between 3 and 10 randomly, what you would have to do? Do you guys remember? You add the number you want to be the minimum, but you subtract it from the multiplier. You guys remember that from last week? So that's what you would have done over here, basically. For the length calculation, if you wanted this to be a minimum of 3 characters, you would say plus 3 and then subtract 3 from 10. Right? So that's the code. The code is repeated twice for the last name and for the first name. So you'll see that this and this looks almost identical. And then this is a little bit funky. I don't know why I left it in there, but essentially, I'm doing this the backwards way, but it was kind of to demo a while loop. So I'm choosing a random number here, but instead of using the +3 or +1000 or +100 to set a minimum, I'm actually choosing it and then running a while loop right afterwards and keep checking. Are you more than 1,000? Are you more than 1,000? Are you more than 1,000? Keep generating a number. But I actually was demoing a while loop in class when I did this, and I saved it and uploaded it, and I haven't really changed it since. It's not the most efficient way to do it. The most efficient way is what we discussed in class, right? You guys understand that? Or do I need to? Okay, let me copy the code. Okay, who can tell me what this does? What does this code do? Come on, guys, this is easy.
Yeah, it gives you string up to random number up to
So,
10 million.
well, it gives you a number that is between what? 0?
No, one.
Between 1 and up to 8 digits long, right? The problem is, can you have, so remember we're using this for password, right? Can a password be just one character?
No.
No, in fact, the system enforces a password that is 4 characters, this system. Most systems enforce a password that is 8 characters, right? You guys remember? So if I'm going to generate a random number, it needs to have a minimum that is not 1. It has to have a bigger minimum. You guys agree? So the easiest way to do that, if I was to say my minimum has to be at least 4 characters, right? What would be the easiest way to do it?
Delete 5 nines.
Multiply by less than 1,000.
So what would I add? 1,000 is what? The smallest four-digit number. You guys agree? And if the minimum is 1, what is the smallest number I have to add to get the smallest minimum number?
4.
I'm sorry, the smallest. Yes, that sounded fine. So if 1 is what I have, the smallest, what do I need to add to 1 in order to get the smallest 4-digit number, which is 1,000?
1,000.
999. So I would say 999 plus, right? You guys agree? And if I added this, and now what do I have to do to keep my maximum the same? Subtract it from here, right? So I would have, yes?
Yes.
So that's the most efficient way to accomplish this. What I'm doing in the homework is instead of doing this, I'm using the same code as before. I'm using this code, but I'm also using a follow-up. Again, this is not a good way to do it. This had a different purpose. It was to demo a while loop, but might as well talk about it. I'm using this follow-up code. I'm actually running a while loop, and we're going to talk about while loops today. That's why this is kind of a little bit out of sequence right now. So, do you guys know there's different types of loops out there? First of all, who understands the concept of a loop? Who does not understand the concept of a loop? Okay, good. So everybody understands the concept of a loop.
I would like to hear an explanation. What was that?
Okay, so basically when we do something continuously, the same actions are being repeated over and over. That's a loop, right? Yes? You guys agree? What drives what drives us to repeat the same action over and over?
Condition.
Some kind of condition, right? Some kind of purpose. We're either waiting to achieve something or to finish something, right? Different purposes drive our repeating something over and over and over and over and over. Okay, so there are different types of purposes out there. There is the do until you're finished, or do until the world comes to an end, or do a certain amount of times, or maybe do until something. So there's different kinds of loops. Now, Java actually recognizes technically 3 different loops, but we're going to talk about 2 different loops. Okay, that's the while loop and the for loop. There are a lot of other languages that also have do, while, and do until, and all kinds of other funky stuff. But for us, we're going to talk about 2. There is the for loop, right, and the while loop. The for loop we've already seen. Did you guys remember for loop from last year? There was a for loop. What's significant about the for loop?
The contingency should be for a specific amount of periods.
Some specific amount of time that we can usually, what? We know ahead of time, right? Before the loop begins, we already know how many times, right? Loop, before it even starts, it already knows how many times it's going to run. Usually, for loops are used with arrays or lists or things that are enumerated. So we know that the end is going to come, and we can usually tell in advance where the end is going to be, right? An array, even if we're past an array and we don't know how long it's going to be, we can always say what? What can we say? How can we ask the array its size? Who said? Repeat. Repeat. What did you say? How do you ask the array its size? That length. Very good. That length. So if you want to run it for the same for a list, if you're using a list is a different type of objects in Java. You can actually say that size. So every single kind of enumerated kind of collection of elements has a way to ask for the length or size, or I don't know, what do you want to call it? Volume. So the for loop, you usually know. You usually know. Even if you're not using an array or something like that, you're still saying, while I is less than 5, right? You're going to say, start from I equals 0 and keep incrementing I by x every time, right? And then as soon as I is more than 5, you go, oh, okay, stop, right? With the while loop, it's kind of one of those, like, they're more time dependent rather than iteration or number of times dependent. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. So for example, you're at a traffic light, right? When you're at a traffic light, you just stop. The light just turned green. Can you tell exactly how long you have to stand at each traffic light?
Typically it's 45 seconds.
Until
Really?
Yeah.
Typically? So that means that anytime I'm in the car and the light just turned red, after 45 seconds I can just whoo!
Typically.
Okay. So what does each and every one of you do in the car when you're behind the wheel to find out whether you can go or you have to continue waiting?
Waiting for contingency to occur.
What do you do in kindergarten language?
Waiting.
What do you do? You don't do anything?
Waiting.
You're waiting for the rain.
You eat a sandwich, you paint your nails. What do?
You hold the brake.
You have your foot on the brake, right? But what do you keep doing in order to find out if you can go or not? You look up and you go, oh. Then you look up and you go, oh. Then you look up and you go, oh. And then what happens? Woo! Right? And you're off. Speed of light. Every time you look up at the traffic light, you don't know what to expect, right? It's not like you're going to tell yourself, I'm going to look up exactly 4 times, and 4th time around, I'm going to see that green light, right? Well, unless you're like, I don't know, some special sixth sense or something. So the point is that you don't know. You don't know, and you keep checking over and over and over and over to see if this condition is true. That's what happens with the while loop. The while loop is going to keep on running over and over, over and over, over and over, until something happens in time that you can't really predict, but it's just going to happen. And then it goes, oh, okay, I'm done. Or, ooh, it's time to go. Get out of the while loop. So that's what's happening here. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to generate the code. I don't know. I might keep generating a random code that is always from 1 to 999. But I'm going to keep generating it until it is, yes, until it is more than 1,000. Right? Make sense? So while the code is less than 1,000, keep running through the while loop. Keep doing it. It might take only once. It might be 600 times. I don't know. But I'm going to keep going through it over and over, each time generating a new random number until finally the number I generated happens to be over 1,000 or equivalent to, because this says less than 1,000. That means if I get 1,000, I'm still what? Equivalent. I'm not less anymore, right? I'm still going to get out of this loop. Make sense? So that was, actually, we're supposed to go over it today in advanced JavaScript PowerPoint over loops, but I have it stuffed into the homework. Yeah, whatever. Showing up. Okay, make sense? So this kind of completely inefficient way is the same thing as you would have done just doing this. Okay? All right, awesome. The rest of the homework should have been very, 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 very straightforward. You're just generating stuff, storing it, and then using it later on. That's it. If you guys have questions, you can email me, but I think it was pretty much, I don't know, long. I'm really hoping that I get my internet, because without internet, it's gonna suck. Okay, so that's what we were just talking about, loops. I'm going to very kind of spear through this. Again, loops, for loops are used for a specified number of times. While loops are used when you don't know when the condition is going to become true, so you're going to keep on checking over and over and over and over. Now, there's also the kinds of while loops that sleep, so they are relying on the time. Some while loops, it's just a matter of how fast can you get through the code inside it and then go back and check again, right? Some loops are like, if you have 100 lines of code, it's a matter of how fast can you get through those 100 lines of code before you check again, right? You're just going to keep on checking. Some loops actually have a sleep condition, so they will actually execute the code and say, sleep a second, for example. And then they will go and they will check again and go through the code again, sleep a second. So they can be time-related, or they can be just a matter of how fast can you get through the body. And obviously, the less the code there is, the faster it gets through it. Okay, so in order to understand the difference between these two loops, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have your PowerPoint and you are able to copy the code from it, then copy the code from it and put it into your Java script debugger, and just run it to see what happens. If you cannot do that, don't type it. It's not worth it. Just look at your neighbor, or I'm going to do it on the screen. So before I begin, in your opinion, how many times should this loop execute? Just looking at the code, think to yourself before you say it so that everybody has a chance to kind of figure out the answer on their own. In your opinion, looking at the code here, the example code, how many times will this loop run? Continue. Okay, good. Does everybody have something in their head?
Something, yeah.
Something in their head? Oh, shush. Yes.
Yeah.
So everybody has a number, right, in their head? Okay. All right. Who thinks it's once? Who thinks it's twice? Who thinks it's 3 times? Who thinks it's 4 times? All right, more or less people are on the right track. You're just held it up for all of them. Okay, so we are splitting by comma. That means the commas are going to get removed. That means how many variables are we going to get? 3. And this is going to run for fruit.length. When you ask fruit the length, it's going to say 3. Right. And it's going to start from 0 and go until I is no longer less than 3. So it means as soon as I becomes 3, it's not going to run anymore. Does that make sense? So it's going to run at 0, 1, and 2. And that's it. As soon as I becomes 3, it's no longer running. It's no longer less. If this had less than or equals, that would be a different story. That would actually be 4. Okay? And if we started with 1, then we'll run 2. Okay, so very good. I'm going to copy the code and just play it so you guys can see how this works. Fortunately, I do not need internet for this guy, but I will need it later, so I don't know what we're gonna do.
Try the internet. Oh, it works.
Michael's office, all of us?
It works now.
It works now? Okay, let me try to connect. Okay, so this is what happens. I clicked run and it says, we have many sweet apples. And then I say, all right, and it says, we also have many sweet oranges. Woohoo! And I say, okay, and it starts talking to me about bananas. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. And luckily, I am done with this, right? So you were right 3 times. Now, while loop. This is a while loop. So looking at this while loop, how many times do you think this is going to run? Same question. You should actually know the answer before looking at the code.
It's indefinite.
Over and over.
Until its counter is done.
One time.
What's the answer? How many times? How many times?
One. One time.
Don't know, right? It's going to run until
If its counter is the name.
until we're done, right? Until the counter is done. So this is a very, very fun thing to play on your friends. You just launch it on their computer and you walk away and you don't show them the code and they can just guess what they have to type in. Like April Fool's kind of thing. That's when you find out if somebody's really good friend of yours or not.
Would you mind showing? Would you mind just activating this code just to show?
Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna say run, and it says, you know, what is your name? And I say, well, it's Ellie, and it says, oh, nice to meet you. I say, yay, nice to meet you too. And it says, wait, what? Bob, and you're like, okay, kind of still cute. And then you go, ah! All right, and you go, ah! And you keep doing that over and over until finally you say, all right, I'm done with this. And it's done. Okay? So that's the while loop. The while loop can run forever until you know exactly what the condition is, and you put that in, you cause that condition, you trigger it. That's what's going to happen. Okay, so I think that kind of beat it to the ground for everybody. Let's talk about the string object. We kind of already discussed it a little bit before. I showed it to you, but let's talk about it a little bit more. So math is an object. Everybody understands that math is an object? And we've used it extensively to generate random numbers and to round them and to do all kinds of fun stuff with that, right? What about string? Well, the string is also an object, and anything in double quotes is a string. And you can perform all kinds of operations on strings. So they also come with a whole bunch of pre-configured methods. Here are some of the common ones. So some of the common ones are index of and last index of. The difference being is from which side you're looking at the word. So for example, happy has 2 P's. So what would be the index of P? Index of P, 2, right? Because it's 0, 1, 2. But last index of P is from the back, right? So it's gonna be 3, right? It's gonna be 3. So it's just gonna look from the back. Let's think of a word that has 3 of the same letter. I don't know, banana, right? So banana. What would be index of A? 1. And what would be last index of A?
3, 1.
Last index of A. 5. Make
So
sense?
if it looks from the end, how's it 5? 0, 1.
I mean, it's not a matter of counting from the end. It's a matter of just looking from the end. Yeah. Match uses regular expressions. Everybody knows what regular expressions are, right? So basically, if you want to say, if you want to compare 2 strings, but instead of comparing them one by, letter to letter, you just want to kind of say, well, if it looks like a dog, then dig, dug, whatever. You would use a regular expression, right? You would put D, and then you would put dot plus, right, for example. or you would just put dot and then a G. You would say if it looks something like that, then fine. So you can use it to match. Replace will literally take a piece of the word that matches your past tense string and replace it with whatever.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, let me think of something. Maybe like if I have today, and I can say today dot replace, and I would say today with tomorrow. Right? It will literally find day and replace it with tomorrow, so it will be tomorrow. Make sense? It will actually look at this guy, cross it out, stick this thing in. I might have messed up those two. You might have put what you're replacing with and then the guy that's being replaced. Look at the description, okay? I don't remember, I always get confused between languages, which one goes first, which one goes last. Next, same with JUnit and TestNG. Like JUnit, it's always expected actual, and TestNG is always actual expected, so it's, I get weirded out. But anyways, search, it will literally just search for a match, but it's going to return a position rather than just like a true or false kind of thing. This one will just say, oh yeah, I see what you mean. I found it, very good. I found the match. So it will actually return the string. But this guy will actually say, oh, I found it at location X. It starts at location X. So put the start location or whatever it found. Slice will, you guys know what slice is, right? It's very similar to split. Split will create an array. Versus slice is what? It will actually slice off a part and only return that part. So this returns an array, but this actually returns a string. Substring will extract the characters from the string. Substring takes sub-str, I should say. Takes in a starting position and the number of characters. So I always get these two confused. That's why I have to keep reading over it. So the starting position and number of characters. Like for example, I want to start at position 1 and extract 3 characters, right? So a 3-letter word. Versus substring is actually you tell it where to start and where to stop. Versus how many characters. I don't really know why they have both. Like I'm pretty sure that if you want to extract 3 characters and you know you're starting at 1, you probably can figure out where you want to finish. But they have both for convenience. In Java, they only have 1. So JavaScript gives you 2. 2 lowercase and 2 uppercase. Explanation needed? No? So if you take a string and you say 2 lowercase, what happens to that string? If you print it out, it's going to be printed out in lowercase. But what happens to the actual variable? Absolutely nothing, right? It's only how it displays it. It basically is going to display it differently, but it actually doesn't change the value. Make sense? Versus something like slice will actually change the value. It will actually slice it. Or split it, for example. It actually changes the value. Okay. So if you guys understand all of this, let's do a little exercise. Quick, somebody poke him. Okay, so you guys remember this? Where did this come from? Where did this come from?
Homework.
Homework, yes. Oh, or last week, sure. What's wrong with this picture?
It's too confusing.
What kind of name am I gonna get out of this?
Random.
I'm gonna get a random name, but what about the actual capitalization of my name? Is it gonna be like a name in English? No. What do we usually do to names in English, or actually most languages? Most.
First
Most.
letter. Capital letter.
First letter is capitalized, and the rest is kind of me, right? Sometimes you get a capital letter in the middle, like McDonald's, right? But most of the time, the first letter is capital, the rest is kind of just all nice lowercase. If I wanted to generate a random string, just like I did before, but this time I wanted to have the case match an actual real name, what would I have to do to this code?
Upcase.
Well, first of all, I have two functions now that I can use. What are the two functions I can use? It's two uppercase and two lowercase, right? So I have two ways to go. I can either pick something and uppercase it or pick something and lowercase it, right? So two options to go. That's fine. All right. So how do I do that? So at what point, what changes do I make? What do I do?
So first of all, let's exclude the top, I think, like the handles or the lowercase letters.
Okay.
So start using that, and then
What's up?
can we use the two uppercase?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. So those are the two functions that we're gonna
So we can do.
we're gonna
can we
debate on.
combine them?
So the first decision we're gonna make. This is how we start our programming. We brainstorm, right? The first decision we have to make is: do we want to turn most of the letters to uppercase or most of the letters to lowercase? Which function do we want to use?
Lower.
So you want to turn most of the letters to lowercase,
It makes sense because it's one string.
or do you want to change one letter to uppercase?
I think it's easy to change one letter to uppercase. It's easy to change one letter to uppercase.
All right, fair enough. So if we're going to be changing one letter to uppercase, which of these letters should be removing? The uppercase or the lowercase? From the original array, which one should we be removing? We want to remove the uppercase because we want to turn only one letter to uppercase rather than many letters to lowercase. All right, fine, that's fine. By the way, no right answer. You can do it either way. Whatever floats your boat is fine. So let's do that. I'm also going to fix my alphabet here. Okay, fine. Okay, good. I have all lowercase letters now. They have been split into an array. When do I do the whole uppercase business? When do I do that? Okay, the first time. The first time I pick a letter, first time, I'm going to convert it to uppercase. Everybody agrees? And the rest of the time, I'm going to do what?
Just let it go.
Just
as it
random
is.
letters.
But the rest of the time, what do I do to the letters I select?
You just randomly select
Nothing.
one.
I don't do nothing. So what do you think? Are we going to be using an if-else, or are we just going to be using an if? If, because if we don't have the this time do this, that time do that kind of situation, we just can use an if, right? It's this time do this, otherwise do nothing, right? It's nothing. So let's use an if. Where does the if go? Inside the for loop or outside the for loop?
Outside.
All right, inside the for loop. What should I be checking for in my if statement?
I equals 0 has to be uppercase.
Okay, we can do that, sure. Here? Like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me sit. It's weird to type when I'm standing. If I, how do you say equals again?
Equal.
Equals, what?
0.
0, all right. Then what?
Then do nothing.
What do you mean do nothing?
No,
Did you say we're going to turn it to uppercase?
Then yeah.
What am I converting to uppercase?
First letter.
Where's the first letter?
String.
Char.
In string? You mean this guy? Dot to uppercase, like that?
Yes.
Yeah? Really?
I guess, yes.
Lots of people are shaking their heads.
Equals this.
All right, fine, good. That's the first mistake. Good. So we actually have to say string equals. string that to uppercase because I actually made a point that just by saying to uppercase, you don't change the value, right? You simply render it differently. So you want to render it differently and save it back into itself using the new rendering. Make sense? So now, string really will be uppercase, sort of. Really? Why not?
Empty.
String is still empty. Yeah. So,
I hope we should put if after
the
first.
all right, very good. All right, so I'm going to put it after. Okay? Is that what everybody wanted to do? What about now? Is everything going to work as expected?
It's not complete, it's only one time.
What is else?
I don't know. What is else?
There's no else.
There's no else. There's no else. Else? Anything else? Looks good?
Well, didn't you say we have the first character capitalized, and after that you don't care, you can create whatever?
I don't know,
right?
you guys are writing this code, I'm just typing.
No,
You should create a second loop
I'm
saying
trying-
if
No,
I
because
is
once it creates the first letter,
Uh-huh,
you have to tell it
that after the
do
first
the
letter,
capitalization,
uh-huh.
and then after that, you can I equals length whatever the rest of it.
Okay, everybody agrees?
makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah.
Everybody agrees?
We need to see whether we agree or not.
I mean, it creates a two uppercase, it doesn't really change that variable.
It doesn't,
right?
but
It
that's
just
why we're
shows it.
rendering it and we're storing it back in
Yeah,
itself.
it just shows it.
It
so
doesn't,
we
no,
can
it
put
shows
like-
it, but as long as you store it, it will keep the new value, right? We're actually replacing those values.
But then it goes by the loop, so I mean.
So anyways, yeah, okay, I'll take that responsibility on myself. Nobody wants to take it. But yes, this is right. This is correct. Very good. Perfect.
What is correct?
This code will give you a properly cased or capitalized name. All right, fair enough. Were there other ways that we can actually, different conditions we could have used in order to check whether this is the first time through the loop or not? Were there other ways besides using I? I is a good way. Don't get me wrong. There's no. This is good. Are there other ways you could have used?
Yes.
What are the other ways?
Check if string is empty.
You can check that the string is empty. Very good. If you're checking that the string is empty, where would the if statement go?
On top.
If you're checking that it's empty, it would just actually go on top, and this code would have to be inside, right? If you're checking that the string length equals 1, it could actually still stay here, right? You guys agree? Because you would actually already have something in the string, and you would just say string dot length, right? Equals 1, then do this, right? So the point is many ways to accomplish the same purpose. None of them wrong, all of them very nice, right?
Can you
Okay.
run it?
Unless I made some mistakes somewhere.
It's your responsibility.
Huh?
You said it's your responsibility.
Oh, that's okay. I'm human. I admit to it. Okay? There you go. You got your name. Okay? Everyone's happy?
Can
Awesome.
you verify that it's actually a real name or not?
A real name?
Well, I mean, it's just a
You
bunch
would
of
have to
letters.
do a lot more. You would have to do a lot more massaging for it to sound like a real name. I've actually had people in class who've done that. Instead of putting letters in, they actually put in syllables, like syllables that most names are made up of, which is like a vowel and a consonant, or a consonant and a vowel, two at a time, and then it sounds somewhat like a real name. But then
Can
to
you ask
uppercase
it
would
to
have to
go
be
and
different.
refer some information on the database where you have
There are also already databases with all kinds of complicated logic and blah blah. Or what are you talking about?
No, like you have a
Verify-
database of names. If you actually want to create a real name, not just a bunch of letters. Never
If you
mind.
really want to do that, you should just choose a random name already from the database, which I was trying to render one.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, if you're gonna go through that trouble, then just query the database for a random name. Okay, that's good. Let's move on. I still may or may not have internet, so let me check. I really do need internet for this. Like, really, not doing.
Do you have one of those pencil laptops which in function road has
Huh?
nothing? Sorry, what?
Okay, so let me do a little bit of an intro. We learned about XPath, we learned about CSS, we know what IDs and names are. Everybody kind of knows what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, remember I also mentioned DOM? You guys remember DOM? D-O-M? DOM, document? Okay, so we haven't covered that yet. I drew kind of little pictures on the board, but we haven't covered it. Before we begin covering it, let me explain to you. The next 45-ish minutes might seem a little bit tedious to some, and you might be starting to think to yourself at some point, this is very long, and I can do this a lot easier with XPath. Why are we doing this? Let me state also before we start that I can technically do all of the stuff we're going to be doing within the next 45 minutes in one step. Okay? But if I do it in one step, none of you will be able to follow me until you go through the process of the 45 minutes. Make sense? So at the end of those 45 minutes, I'll show you the one step and you'll go, oh. But during those 45 minutes, you have to suffer through it. Okay? With me, together, as in follow along and hit your head against the wall, all that fun stuff. Additionally, why are we doing this? Because DOM is not going to be used so much by you in IDE. IDE doesn't use DOM. Selenium came out with Selenium 2. Everybody kind of understood that on the first day, right? So we used to have just IDE and RC, and then we came out with WebDriver, right? Okay, WebDriver actually uses DOM. So WebDriver will use very similar kind of ways to locate things as DOM does. And that means if you go through the exercise now, when we get to WebDriver, it's going to just make sense. Okay? So 45 minutes suffering now, day 10, things make sense. Additionally, if you're ever going to work with XML and you're going to be parsing XML, there's DOM XML and DOM HTML. They're completely the same. So if you learn how to deal with DOM now with HTML, you can parse any XML document. Make sense? Okay, so having said that, what I want everybody to do is simply to log into HRM. Log into HRM, and you and I are going to pick an employee's name. Let's see, which one do I like? Let's do Bill Will. Okay, Bill Will. We're gonna assume that Selenium does not have a very handy get text command for us, okay? And then Selenium does not know how to use XPath. So far, so good? So forget everything you've learned so far. For the next 45 minutes, we're only trying to learn DOM, and Selenium does not have a handy get text function. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open our JavaScript debugger thing. So it's in Firebug, open Firebug and switch to the console. And you want to actually use the input field on the bottom. So if you have one of these guys open, click the little red button, and it's going to convert it back into the input, into the command line. Okay, so here we go. Done. Each HTML document loaded into a browser window becomes a document object. That makes sense, right? I've actually been using the word document a lot. The document object provides access to all HTML elements in the page within the script. JS, JavaScript, HTML, DOM can be used to retrieve dynamically assigned IDs of elements during test execution. So if you, for whatever reason, need to find out the dynamically assigned ID of something, you can actually ask DOM to give you that, which is not something that, for example, XPath can give you, right? You can actually tell DOM to give you that. If you need a DOM reference, this is actually a very useful one, and you might as well go and open it now, because I'm actually going to ask you during this exercise to look up something from this reference. So you can go ahead and click on it and start opening it, because I know that connection is real slow. So click on it, and then you can just kind of forget about it and let it do its thing. Unless it's frozen like mine is, and then you're kind of...
So
Okay.
Just give me back the extra second previous way.
In fact, actually, this, the w3schools.com, it's a pretty cool reference for anything. I keep coming back to this thing anytime I have trouble with anything, really. I see you guys are friends as well, huh? No, it's okay, go for it. Yeah, no, it's no problem. Just, you know, Michael goes, if you leave anything in the classrooms, just take that. Alright, so far so good. Can we move on? Everybody type this in? Don't wait for it to open. As long as you got the URL, I'm happy. Can I move on?
It is
Yeah?
open.
Oh, good. Okay, so moving on. Alright, so every single object in DOM is going to have these three methods. Every single one. Doesn't matter if you're talking about the whole document, or a little button on the document, or a text field on the document, or I don't know, a paragraph or a link, doesn't matter. All of them will have these three methods. The methods are get element 1 by ID, get elements by name, right? And get elements by tag name. Okay, what's the difference between element and elements?
Elements multiple.
Okay, elements is going to give you an array. What if you only have one element on the page with a specified name? And you say get elements by name. What are you going to get?
One array is one.
You're still going to get an array, but with one element. So even though there's only one, you're still not going to get the element, you're going to get an array. That means you have to take the element out of the array, even if there's only one. Now, if there's only one and you want to take it out of an array, how do you do that? Only one, and it's inside an array. How do you take an element out of an array? Let's start from the beginning. If I have an array ABC, array ABC, ABC, and I want to take out B, how do I take B out?
Square brackets 1.
Exactly. So this is, I'm going to put in 1 in square brackets. I'm going to say ABC square brackets 1. Yes? If I'm going to get an array, it has only one element in it. 0. So even though there's only one element on the page, if you still get an array, all you have to do is just say 0, and it's out. All right. So what are the three methods again? Get element by ID, get elements by
Name by
and get
tag.
elements by
Tag
tag name. Tag name, which is not the same as XPath, right? XPath is a whole string of tags, but a tag name is just one. If you're at the very top of the document, and you say get elements by tag name, and you pass in A, what are you gonna get? What does A stand for? Link. Okay, A is a link. So what are you gonna get? All what? All what and where?
In the first frame, in outer frame, all the links.
Well, that's okay. Don't worry about this. Let's think about a regular page without frames. You're gonna get all links on that document, the whole document. But if you actually have a table, you're not at the document, you're at the table level. You already got a table, and you say table dot get elements by tag name, and you pass an A. you're only going to get the links that are inside that table. Does that make sense? So it matters what object you call the method on. Okay? You reduce your scope each time you get lower down into the DOM. Make sense? Sort of? We'll do a lot of this, so it will make sense. Okay, so these are all the elements. There's a lot of them. All of them have those three methods in common. All of them also have different things between each other. So they all have additional methods. Those additional methods you don't have to learn. You just have to go to the reference that I provided and look them up. And we're going to do that later. It's just like having all kinds of shared methods. All of the things on the page also have shared properties, variables that come predefined for them. One of them is ID. So you can actually say, get me this element, right? For example, you say, get me all the links, right? And then you say, from the array of links, get me the one at index 3. And from that index 3, get me the ID of that element, for example. So you can say just 3.id. You can find out the node type. That means you're literally asking it, what is the value of the attribute that says type inside the actual tag? And what is the tag name? Now, if you're retrieving all the elements by tag name, obviously you already know what their tag is. But if you're retrieving them by name, because you happen to have several items on the page with the same name, right? You can ask them then, okay, well, I'm looking for the one with the P tag, not the A tag or the input tag. And I really want just a paragraph with that name. Make sense? That happens a lot because sometimes people put a label and an input box and they'll give them the same name. And they won't give them an ID. And the reason they have the same name is because somebody copied and pasted. So you can just say, get me all the things by name, and then, well, which one of you has the label, which one of you has the input. All right, so far so good. Now, the way DOM works is it's kind of like a family tree, right? You have your ancestor, and then they had children, and then those two children had children, and this one had only one, and this one had one, this one didn't have any, but this one had like 4. That's what DOM looks like. This would be the actual HTML. And this would be your title, for example. This would be like the, I don't know, what's inside title?
Header.
Header, maybe?
No.
I don't know what's inside title.
Title of chapter.
I don't know.
It's the other
No,
way,
there's a header and then there's
head
title.
and then title.
I'm thinking more like,
No, there's a header.
no, what's
and then
inside
title.
title?
Title. The title.
Inside title, guys. Inside title.
Yeah,
What's inside title? Okay, fine, this one doesn't have a kid.
No, it's supposed to be. The first is header and then there's title.
Yeah.
You just have to switch them.
Okay, fine, yeah, you're right, okay, yeah, you're right.
Head and then title.
Okay, header, I see what you mean now.
And then title.
Okay. All right, there we go. That works. Okay, so this one had 2 kids. The header had 1 kid. That was the title. And then this one had another one, which is body, right? And the body might have what? What might a body have?
Title has nothing.
A
Just
big
like,
thing that
Paragraph.
contains a lot of children. I don't
Title might have
know.
name.
A list, a table, right? Has a table. And this table has what? TRs. Actually, it might have 1 TH, and then all the others are TRs, right? And all the TRs are going to have TD. And this one might not have any TDs. This one might have only 1 TD. Actually possible in HTML. It's going to be a very messed up table. Table data.
Oh. Table header, table.
TH is table header, TR is table row, and TD is table data. So does that make sense? All right. So this was your family. And, don't give me that look. And this was you, right here. What would table be to you? Okay, would you also agree that it's an ancestor?
Yeah.
Okay, an ancestor. The correct term would be ancestor, okay? And if this is you, who is this to you?
Cousin, brother.
We're not in Alabama. This is you, a sibling, right? A sibling. All right, good. What would this be?
Parent.
Parent. Okay, good. What about this guy?
Grandmother?
No, it's
Free ancestor.
great ancestor.
Yeah, great
It would still be an
grandmother.
ancestor.
Yeah.
If it's not a parent, it's an ancestor. Make sense? So it's the same kind of thing. So if I'm holding a node, I'm holding a reference to a node. That means I'm holding a reference to some kind of object on the page. I can ask it, do you have children? Right? And it's going to tell me yes or no. It's a Boolean. It's going to return yes or no. So before I actually get the child nodes, because if I say get children and it has no children, it's going to blow up on me, I can say if you have children, get me all your children. And as you can see, there's square brackets after it. That means it's going to get me an array, right? This is going to get me a Boolean, but this one doesn't get me an array. Even if there's again one. Okay, attributes. Okay, I have my tag, and I want to find out all the attributes. I can get all the attributes. And toString will actually give you not the text in the element. That's actually very misleading. You might say, oh, I have the text box. toString. You're not actually going to get the text of the box inside the box. You're going to get the HTML for toString. Does that make sense? So this one's a little misleading. All right, so far so good. Let's do some DOM. Go back to Orange HRM. Again, one more time, we're going to be looking for Bill Will, right? We're trying to retrieve Bill Will's name. And prepare for about 35 minutes of mini torture. Okay, I'm here on this page. I want to get from all the way outside this page all the way here. What's my first step? Where am I now? Let's put it this way. Where am I now?
HTML.
I'm in HTML. HTML is, what is HTML? Is the document, right? That's what we said. HTML is the document. So what am I going to say first? Document dot, and then I only have three options to choose from. What are my three options? By ID, by name, by tag. Okay. So far so good. Let's decide what I'm trying to get. What am I trying to get?
Bill.
This guy? What is this guy? How do we find out what this guy is? We can use Firebug. We can select it and we can find out what the tag is. Let's do that. So we're going to use a Firebug. Hopefully everybody remembers how to do that.
Yep.
Select it. All right. So we're going to look at this tag. Are you guys looking at this tag? Let's actually, let me make it a little bit more precise. Okay, this is the tag we're looking at. What tag is this?
What do you mean? Just
What does this tag represent? What is it?
Table date.
What is A? It's a link. Does this link have an ID?
Sure.
Yeah.
Have an ID?
Yeah, it has ID.
Does it have an attribute ID equals?
Yeah.
Where?
Right there. ID.
In the middle.
No, that's not an attribute.
Yeah,
No. That's actually a value inside the href. Is there an attribute that says ID equals followed by double quotes and the value inside?
No.
No. So it does contain the letters ID, and I know that's a little misleading, but this is actually part of an href. Okay? In fact, if you don't highlight it, let me remove the highlight. It's not gonna let me do that. You can actually tell that this whole part is red. So it's actually, as you can see, the actual attributes are blue. So if this is not blue, you can't use it. Okay? So there's no ID. Bad news. Does it have a name? Does this tag have a name? Let me rephrase. Does it have an attribute? N-A-M-E, followed by an equal sign and two double quotes. No. So that means I can't use get element by ID. Can't use get elements by name. What's my only option?
Tag.
Tag. Alright, so far so good. If I say get elements by tag and I pass in A, how many do you think I'm gonna get? I'm at the document level right now. Somebody said it. So I'm at the document level and I'm gonna say get elements by tag. I'm gonna pass in A. How many am I gonna get?
As many as A.
Okay, you guys, let me explain something. In my class, there's only 2 answers. One and a lot.
A lot.
Okay? It's pretty easy. So how many am I gonna get?
A
A lot. Let's even put it let's put it even more into a ballpark. It's gonna be more than 5, more than 10, probably even more than 15. Okay? So far so good? If I have that many, is it gonna be easy for me to get the correct link, to get the correct name? No. So my first job is to reduce scope, right? All right. How can I reduce scope? What can I select that is above this link, but also kind of will let me get into the right area, so contains this link. Above it, but contains it. So a parent of some kind, right? Or an ancestor of some kind. Not parent, but ancestor of some kind. What is some ancestor that I can select that will help me reduce the scope?
TR plus what?
I'm sorry?
The table column employee name.
The table name?
You can select a column. You can only select rows. Tables don't have columns, unfortunately. They have TRs. So you can select a row, that's true.
Maybe ID.
The specific table.
Let's just pick an ancestor. It's not, there's no catch in this question. There's going to be further on catches, but not in this one. If I was to choose an ancestor to narrow my scope,
Table row.
pick one.
Table row.
Okay, row, fine.
It's
Okay,
odd.
fine. So I can do row. Let's try that. Let's try that. Can you guys say document dot get elements by tag name and pass it in double quotes, in the parentheses, double quotes, TR. Go ahead and do that.
Yes.
So again, switch back to console, and on the bottom you're gonna type in document dot get elements by tag name, and then you're just gonna say in double quotes TR. So I'm on the console. I have my JavaScript enabled, and I'm just typing on the button. I know it's a little bit small, so let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. It doesn't look like it's increasing the text here. It's actually increasing my. Yeah, unfortunately, it's increasing my menus, but not my actual output. Okay, if you guys can maybe sort of see this, sort of, kind of, maybe. Okay, so what happened? What did it return? Okay, is there anything inside the square brackets? What does that mean? What does that mean? Let me give you a little bit of a hint. If you press the up key, you can retype the same thing you already did, so it's going to repeat what you already typed in. Go ahead and press the up key so you have it again, and then after it put dot length.
Right?
So retype what you already typed in. I just did that by pressing the type up key and then saying dot length. And pressing enter again. What's the length? What does that tell you? What does that tell you? How many rows did it find?
0.
How could that be? Let's see who gets to go. We said document. Get me all the rows, and it came back with 0. What's the problem? What's the problem?
You didn't give the value for each row.
No, you gave the tag, right? You said give me all the tags that are rows, and it said I don't have any. Why did it say I don't have any? I see rows. Why didn't I find any rows? Am I looking in the right place? That's a big hint I can give everybody. Am I looking in the right place?
We're not looking in the right place.
We're not looking in the right place. Where should we be looking?
In the right
In the right place.
And the right place being?
The right place.
Oh, I'm getting 50.
Not the left place? Good, not the body, but remember we have a document and the frame. So when we're saying document, we're actually talking to that guy. That guy really doesn't have any rows. It's giving us the truth. It's like, I ain't got any. Would love to give you some, but I ain't got any. So before we can actually ask the document to give us rows, we have to be in the right document. And in order to get the right document, we have to first get into the frame that contains the right document. Now, that can be actually a little bit easier because our frame happens to have something that's not a tag. So go and look at your frame again. Go ahead and find your frame. You guys remember how to find your frame? You can search for it. You can say frame. Just like this. Oh, sorry, HTML. You switch to HTML. And then you can search for it. You can say frame, and it's going to find your frame. So go ahead and look at it. Does it have an attribute ID?
Yes.
Yes, it does. This one does have an attribute ID. And does that attribute have a value? What's the value?
Right.
Do yourself a favor and copy it. Not type it in or try to remember it. Copy it. So you're going to just highlight it and copy it.
I'm sorry, copy right menu or just the whole
The right menu. Just the right menu. And then you're going to do the same thing as you did before, but you're going to look by ID. So you're going to say get element by ID. And inside double quotes, you're going to paste the correct ID. This way, we're not going to get into the whole, I skipped the letter, I miscapitalized. Just paste it in. And you're going to say enter. And it gives you not something that's not empty, right? That's already a success. Something's not empty. That's good. And if you put your mouse over it, it will actually highlight. So you can actually say, okay, I did get the frame. This is good. I have the frame.
Sure. Do you mind just showing me come out one time again?
Yeah, sure.